and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/082, and you can email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net. And you can check out the show also on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Hello, everybody. A little bit later than I had originally intended for episode 82, but here we are. It is another great week in June as we are really in the heart of the beginning of bike touring season here in the United States and, frankly, I guess the Northern Hemisphere altogether. So it's very exciting to be coming at you with another show. I am on this episode going to be talking about the bike tour that I was supposed to be on right now, and the bike tour that I'm actually going to be doing next week, and all of the reasons around all of that. So stick around on that. We have a full episode based in the journal, so let's get cracking. The journal, of course, is where we talk about rides, tours, my rides in this case. So here we go. Originally, I was going to be unveiling a tour after the fact, I guess, sort of. I was going to be I was going to have a show last week and then doing the tour this week. Well, as things turned out, I ended up having some work-related activities that intervened in a way that it was better for me to take a week off and postpone the tour. And when all was said and done, it was actually kind of interesting because as a result of having a little bit less time than I would have liked, I'm going to be changing up the tour that I was going to do. But it was so exciting and the development of all of it was kind of interesting and fun that I thought I would share the process with you. And also maybe to see if there are people that can help fill in some of the blanks. And I'll explain all of that as we go along here. Let's just start by saying this is a tour that was inspired by episode 79 and Frank Moritz and the Eastern Express. As I had talked about, I was really intrigued with the possibility of tackling a portion of that. At one point, I was thinking I was going to just ride as far west as I could, maybe get to the point where I can hit Indiana and then get a rental car or something and basically come back to DC. That seemed less interesting to me the more I dug into it. I think that if I do decide to really push west at some point, I think I'm going to really do it. At the same time, interestingly, the Adventure Cycling Association put out a major new route, and that is the Chicago to New York route. And that sort of changed a lot of things for a lot of people, including Frank's route. Frank actually changed some of the Eastern Express as he had created and made some modifications in a spot that was a big question mark around the Steubenville, Ohio area. And that was actually an area that I was going to go scout out just to see how it goes. So it turns out somebody got there ahead of time and said that it was a little bit dicey, just in terms of how the trails and the bridges work and all of that. And Steubenville's a really steep climb out of town. A variety of different issues with that. So when Frank found out that the ACA route had a better crossing of the Ohio River further south, he made some changes and avoided some of the issues. Now, I'm going to get into Steubenville in a little bit because this is going to come into play a little bit later, but it's also a major part of the route that I was thinking of. So as a part of taking a look and thinking about all these different options, I realized that there was a trail in Ohio that I've always really wanted to ride, but I don't think I've ever talked about it, not even a single time in 81 episodes of the show. Now we're on 82, and I'm going to mention this one, and that is the Ohio to Erie towpath. It is a canal towpath, very much like the C&O, very much like the Erie Canal. I seem to be drawn to these for some reason. Crushed limestone, same basic type of thing, and it runs for about 110 miles starting in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, the beauty of that is the trail begins a very short distance away from the Cleveland train station, the lakefront train station, which is literally steps from Lake Erie. As many of you know, if you've been listening to the show or if you've binged it over time, I grew up not far from Lake Ontario. So the Great Lakes are always something that's kind of very special to me. I've talked about perhaps doing a circumnavigation of Lake Ontario at some point. That's still on my list. But I was really intrigued with the concept of trying to figure out a way to link Cleveland with the rest of the Eastern Express that Frank came up with. And so I spent a few days doing some research on all of this. And as it turns out, the way the mileages work, the way the camping opportunities work, there is what I'll call, I guess in shorthand, a Cleveland spur for the Eastern Express. Now, big caveats here. Number one, I have never ridden it. Number two, there are connections. There are 2 days in particular that are based completely and solely on Google Maps biking directions. And as we all know, sometimes those aren't always the best bet. I'm not sure to what extent these are a fully safe route, but it's certainly the route that Google Maps is giving. And I would say that for many more adventurous bike tourists, that often will be enough for them to at least tackle it. So I'm going to say with those two very big caveats, I'm going to reveal what this Eastern Express Cleveland spur looks like, because someday I may ride this, and I would actually, I'm going to throw out a sort of call to action. All you Sprocket Podcast people are hearing drums in the background in your head. I don't have them. Anybody in Ohio, particularly in the portions of Ohio that I'm talking about, if you have any insight on some of these roads, please let me know. I have, and I will be letting you all know at the show notes, pedalshift.net/082. I've actually made the Ride with GPS cue sheets and maps for this spur. And I'd like folks to take a look at that. I'll have some embedded maps and whatnot also in the show notes, just so you can take a quick look at them. But it's actually kind of a fun look at this entire setup. So starting off with Cleveland, my initial intention was because the Capital Limited train, the same train that I take to Harper's Ferry, the same train that I can take to and from Cumberland to Pittsburgh, all of those also drops off in Cleveland. And the original idea was that I was going to take the train from either DC or from not far from my cabin. The original plan was that I was going to be coming from the cabin and getting dropped off at the Martinsburg, West Virginia train station. Extra detail you don't need, but there we are. And dropping me off at about 3 a.m. or so in Cleveland is when that train drops you off up there. A few hours before sunrise, so maybe catching some Z's on the train, but getting dumped off and being able to maybe just go a couple of blocks north to see Lake Erie and maybe sort of, hey, if there's even an opportunity to dip the tire in, who knows, maybe not, but there would be that opportunity early on. And then turning around and grabbing the Ohio and Erie Canal and going south for basically the entire day. A lot of great write-ups on the Ohio and Erie Canal. It sounds very similar to the Gap, very similar to the C&O, very similar to perhaps the Katy Trail and some others as well. But it looked really good. Goes through Cleveland, works its way down through Akron and a few other towns as well, and ends up dumping you off not too terribly far from Canton, Ohio. If you're an American football fan, you know that's where the Pro Football Hall of Fame is. I remember as a kid visiting there and being very excited about that. There is a campground at Bridgeport Quarry Trailhead, and that's in, pardon me, forgive me, Ohio people, Massillon, Ohio? I think it's Massillon. And if it's not, I apologize. I am not an Ohioan by any stretch of the imagination. The beauty of that is that it's a free campground, and it's set up specifically for through bikers like myself and perhaps you. About 65 miles that day, so not too bad at all, and the grades are pretty good, and the trails look good, and there's tons of watering spots and places to get food along the way. So that looks like a great way to start day one. Day two is the beginning of a section that is the Google Maps section, the sort of question mark section. And that is going from that campsite near Massillon, Ohio, and taking local roads 53 miles to Tappan Lake State Park. And again, forgive me if I am absolutely mangling the pronunciations here, but that is the spot. It is largely taking, and of course you can take a look at the show notes, pedalshift.net/082. It's largely taking roads that are the remainder of the trail of that towpath, which is at that point called the Congressman Ralph Regula Towpath Trail. Former congressman, I think, and working your way down, let's see, Ohio Route 21, also back onto the Towpath Trail again, and then eventually getting through, let's see, Ohio 800, Ohio Route 416, Ohio Route 39, Ohio Route 259, and then a whole variety of ones beyond that, rehooking you up with 800 as well down there. Go check out all of that. These roads are definitely secondary roads. They do look like that many of them are pretty well shouldered along the way. But again, this is, I'm only using Google Maps, and I have not really done the Google Earth trick where, and I think Frank talked about this, where you can kind of see what the route looks like based on Google's little robot cars going through with their photography showing you all of the different shoulder widths and whatnot. Also, it's hard to tell whether or not these are very high trafficked areas. Again, they are not the freeways, of course, but you never know. I think that the US 250 is a portion of the route going into Denison, a small town where there's actually a very good college there that a friend of mine from high school went to. So it's unclear whether or not this is a really great route, but it looks pretty great. And at only 53 miles to Tappan Lake, works out pretty well. Now you'll be on the south side of Tappan Lake, and there are campsites there. They're typically, it seems, set up for car camping. So the camping rates are in the $20 range. But in this part of the state, camping is a little bit few and far between. So unless you're going to be doing some stealth camping, this would be a good spot. And the place that I sort of intended to go to just because it seemed to be the right distance as well. From there, day 3. This one is where the biggest question mark, I think, is. Now, it's largely going to be on routes 250 and 22, and then some other local roads, county roads, heading from Tappan Lake State Park all the way through Steubenville, Ohio, and then rehooking up with a variety of trails that make up the Eastern Express, as Frank talked about, and as you can check out over on easternexpressroute.com. I've, again, got the ride with GPS coordinates and all of that. You can check that out in the show notes for this episode. But this is a longer day of 70 miles that takes you to the Cecil Henderson campsite, which is in Pennsylvania. It is on the Montour Trail. So assuming that these roads are decent and gets one to Steubenville, and the Steubenville bridge crossing is a little dicey going over the Ohio River. There's a sidewalk, no problem, but apparently you have to lift your bike upstairs, and you have to lift your bike up over, wait for it, an actual divider where the sidewalk just sort of ends before you can hit the Panhandle Trail in West Virginia, in the northern panhandle of West Virginia, that little spike that comes up in the state. So that's a little bit annoying, and it's too bad. That was the whole reason why Frank ended up rerouting the Eastern Express to further south down towards Wheeling, West Virginia. But this was the most direct route for the route that I was intending to do. So rather than do a different route through Wheeling and then taking the Wheeling Trail up through West Virginia and all the way back up to the Panhandle Trail, that would have added a lot of extra miles. So the more direct route on the roads struck me as the better bet. Folks in Ohio, folks in West Virginia, anybody who's ever ridden in this area, if you have some feedback for me on this, I would really love to know whether or not it's that dicey or that bad in the Steubenville area. But that was the route that I was actually going to try, and that would have been day 3. Again, Cecil Henderson campsite on the Montour Trail, a really well-regarded campsite, free. It's got water. It's got a porta potty. It sounds really great. The Panhandle Trail and the Montour Trail are two converted, I believe, former rail trails. And they both work really well, and they both get good high marks. The Panhandle Trail in particular is very rural, not a lot of services, not a lot of water, I understand from some other reports that I've read, but a very good biking trail. So the nice thing about the end of day 3, even though it's a long one, is you're off the road, you're done with things, and the spur from Cleveland completes once you get on to that Panhandle Trail in West Virginia. So from Cecil Henderson in Pennsylvania, it's the continuation of the Eastern Express route that we talked about in episode 79. This is going from there to Connellsville, Pennsylvania. You probably would remember, those of you who have listened to either the Tour Journals episodes of the Gap rides that I've done, the Great Allegheny Passage, or you've listened to past episodes of the show where I talk about the Great Allegheny Passage. Connellsville is an awesome spot to camp. There are are Adirondack shelters behind a grocery store that are set up by the town. They're a fantastic place to camp. If it's raining, you've got a dry spot to be. You want to pitch your tent, you want to put up a hammock, whatever. All of these spots are really good for all of that. So Connellsville, it's a 69-mile ride, all trails, really fantastic. From Connellsville, again, continuing on the Gap and the Eastern Express route, this is essentially a route that I've talked about on the show before, going down to Rockwood, Pennsylvania, which is a nice, cute little town, very rural, very little in the way of cell phone signals. I know I've never been able to get one either on AT&T or on Verizon, which can be a plus for folks. But there's a great campsite there. Private campsite, the Husky Haven Campground, which I've stayed at before. There's also a rental B&B that's associated with it, and they've got Wi-Fi if you needed that. So that is Rockwood, Pennsylvania. A shorter trip that day, 45 and a half miles, just down there. And here, the distances, you could do more, but you're sort of limited by the available campsites. And what I found is that I'd rather do a little bit shorter miles to be able to get into places to avoid wild camping when I'm in a planning mode. But if I'm rolling through Rockwood, hypothetically, and I've still got miles in me and daylight and want to keep going, I'll keep pushing and maybe look for continuing on for a wild camping opportunity or something else up ahead. The next day is only a 44-mile ride to Cumberland. And of course, we all know about Cumberland. I've talked about that. That's the junction of the C&O and the Gap. And from there, you can either take the train back to DC. That's what I was planning on doing. Or add on another 3 days on the C&O, Hancock, Harpers Ferry, DC. So I think this is a really fun potential ride. It's one that I'm looking forward to potentially doing at some point. Again, calling it the Cleveland Spur to the Eastern Express. I'm not sure if those 2 days on the road sections are a great idea or not. So again, if you're an Ohioan and you have some insight, and this would be, between, say, Massillon and the State Park, and between the State Park and Steubenville. So going through Denison and towns like that. If you've got any feedback on that, I would love to hear about that. If these roads are a good idea or a bad idea, you can take a look at the Ride with GPS ideas over in the show notes at pedalshift.net/082. And I've got all those links. And of course, that includes all those Ride with GPS routes and then the Pedal Shift Guide to the C&O, which helps give you ideas on camping and stuff from there. So again, kind of final thoughts. The tricky and question mark sections I'm willing to be a guinea pig for are those road sections between the Ohio and Erie Towpath and Tappan Lake, and then Tappan Lake and Steubenville. So we'll see how that all goes. I'm going to give it a shot at some point. And Ohioans, if you've got any thoughts, let me know. Next week, this was a ride that I was very gung-ho to do, and I still am. Next week, however, I've got a few fewer days than I would like to pull that off, but I would like to scout Steubenville. I would like to see if it's really as dicey as it sounds from the reports, because I think that that's kind of a critical spot. The roads look like that they are probably passable, but I would at least like to see what Steubenville looks like. So what I am going to do is I'm going to do a ride that begins in Connellsville. I'm going to take the train up on Sunday as I record this, and I'll overnight there. It's a very short ride across the river there into the area where the Gap is, from the train station in Connellsville to the Adirondack shelters there. The best part about that is I can do my food shopping either that night or first thing in the morning, get a good night's sleep. Drops you off in about the 9 o'clock hour, give or take. So I'll have some twilight left. I'll bring bike lights just in case. Get a good night's sleep, and then take the Gap north to Pittsburgh. And then I'm thinking actually of trying to get all the way to the Cecil Henderson campground that I described in the ride that I intended to do, because that looks like a good, nice long ride to get me out there, have a good, nice overnight. And then the next day, check out that extension over to Steubenville, see what that river crossing looks like, see what Steubenville looks like, and go from there. If it is as challenging as the suggestions are, I may rethink and consider rerouting the route that I pulled together to do the Chicago to New York ACA route, the new version of the Eastern Express route that follows the Ohio River south from there and goes down to Wheeling and crosses in Wheeling, and then figure out road routes from Wheeling up through Ohio and then catching up with the Ohio and Erie Canal that way. I'm not going to have the time to ride all of that to check that out. But I am intrigued to see if the Steubenville section is more trouble than it's worth. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, new term I learned last episode, I'm going to do a lollipop and turn around in Steubenville and then go back either to the Cecil Henderson campground or maybe a little bit further down the Montour Trail. There are some other camping options down there. I'm going to continue to camp, and then I'm going to continue my way back down. I may go back up to Pittsburgh, take a little bit different route so that I can start the gap from the beginning, and then ride my way down through the gap and either end up in Connellsville or perhaps all the way back down in Cumberland, depending on how much riding I'm getting in, how nice the weather is, how I'm feeling, things like that. So beyond that, I have a few intentions for the ride. Number one is I wanted to check out the Steubenville stuff like I've been talking about. But number two is I've been so excited about creating the Pedalshift guide to the C&O that I've also decided that I'd like to do a Pedalshift guide to the Great Allegheny Passage as a companion to that. So this ride is partially going to get me started on doing some campsite reviews and building that out the same way that I built the C&O guide as well. So that's intention number one. Intention number two is if you're a newsletter subscriber, I'm going to be doing a daily check-in in that way that I've done it in the past. It's sort of a quasi-live podcast. There's going to be an email coming by Sunday for details that'll give you time to subscribe to that quasi-live feed. So if you're not a newsletter subscriber, I'd encourage you to get subscribed as quickly as possible between now and Sunday as I record this, and that way you will be able to get the daily check-ins from there. That is another intention that I have. Third intention is I'm going to record more things than that beyond the check-in, and they're either going to be possibly for a new tour journal if the route is interesting and what I have to say is interesting, or worst case scenario, they'll just be a little bit of live stuff for the future episode of the podcast. So we'll have that in the Pedalshift project. So doing some recordings. And last but not least, of course, what I normally do, lots and lots of pictures. We're going to get those up on Instagram. I'm going to get those up on Facebook. I'm going to get those up on Twitter. So no matter how you follow the show, there's going to be opportunities for seeing the sights along with me. I want this to be a little bit more relaxing than my last tour. As you all heard when I reported back, Hull and Bell Star is a lot of work. So doing this in a little bit lighter load seems to be something that I'm looking forward to. Of course, I'm also going to be trying to pull some longer miles than I was able to with Bell Star. So that is another thing that is a good reason why I'm not going to be taking her with me on this particular trip. Wanted to thank everybody who has gotten in touch with the show. A lot of folks from Europe have been chiming in. Thank you. I am very excited to hear from you, and hopefully I've gotten back to everybody. I'm really excited for touring season. I'm excited about my good buddy Mysterious James, who is in the Scandinavian region of the world, one of the countries that shall go nameless. But maybe I've already said that he was in Norway. He's in Norway. Anyways, he's cycling there, so I'm excited to hear some news from him, and I'll report on that as well. Lots of great tours. Last year, I had a series of tours that I followed. Folks who were blogging, folks who were podcasting, et cetera, et cetera. I remember we met Michael Risico, we met Patience, we met a few other people as well. I'm hoping to be able to find a few other people who are going to be doing that, whether they're tackling some grand global expedition or a cross-country trip or something like that. So I'm going to be hopefully having in future podcasts some summer tours to watch. That's going to be coming on a future episode of the show, probably sometime in late June or early July. Next week is a topic show while I'm out riding the trails of Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, etc. I'm going to have a topic episode, and that's going to be on how to deal with a wet tent on tour. I am hopeful that that is not advice that's prophetic for my ride. I'm hoping for nice dry weather. I prefer it, but I've got a few tips for you if you ever do run into the wet when you are on tour, as so many of us run into, especially during this time of year. So that's going to be coming next Thursday for episode 83 of the Pedalshift Project, and I hope to see you here then. As we close out the show, we'd like to thank everybody who helps support the Pedalshift Project by joining the Pedalshift Society. We're talking $5, $2, $1 a month, or one-shot contributions, annual contributions. They all help make the show possible. They all help make me be able to give you more things, like, say, the Pedalshift Guide to the Gap that I'm trying to pull together starting next week. So thank you all for your support. On to the Society. Ethan Georgie, Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lane, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Josiah Matthews, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittis, Thomas Skadow, Seth Krieger, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Noah Schroer, Harry Telgadas, John Sikorsky, Richard Killian, Chris Barron, Scott Taylor, Brian Wren, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Paul Mulvey, Stuart Buchan, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Harry Hugel, Ferguson Meek, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, and a big thank you also to all anonymous and past contributors for helping to make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net. Lots of great content. You can hear the Pedalshift Project through iTunes or your favorite podcast aggregator. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his debut album. Track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Habitat, wherever cool music is available.